Yeah, I think it started recording now. I have completely forgotten how to use this. Yeah, it's visible, right?
Okay, so let's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So thank you for joining in and welcome to this writing workshop. The aim of this workshop is to improve the content that goes up in our website. Attendance is being taken for this workshop, and I hope that by the end of this session, you are able to write better articles, not only for nickel and dime, but for any other purpose you write for. Any editorial member who wants to add anything in the middle, just feel free to interject at any point of time. Yeah, just go to the next slide. So I'll begin with the basic procedure that I too personally follow that helps to write better. Firstly, no research article can be written if you do not spend enough time in researching. So I strongly suggest that everybody spends about a week just reading up existing literature on any theme that you are interested in writing. Like, for instance, even if you have this vague idea that you want to talk about, let's say, the bilateral relations of India and China, just make sure you read articles or interviews or even like academic papers so that you're familiar with the topic in general. The next step is would be to narrow your topic and think of maybe something more specific to write about. um I mean, the more specific your article is, the better the article comes out to be, because it's much more detailed and it's just better analyzed. I'll talk about how to narrow a little later, but after you're done narrowing, comes the structure bit, where I feel like it's very difficult for even the editors and the people reading your article to understand what exactly your argument is if you don't structure your article properly. So just make sure you have a rough draft prepared, where you chalk out, what your introduction will have and how many paragraphs you'll have, what is the content of each paragraph, and how you will conclude your article. So ideally, before you meet your cluster heads, please try to at least have a draft ready so that they can help you refine your article. So make sure like you're till this process when you meet them for the first time before submitting your article. After that is when you start the writing process. Um, if you're unclear about grammar or anything like that while you're writing, there's no harm in going back and referring to, let's say, brush up your grammatical, just read up on grammar and the rules of English. It just helps avoid those have had on in these kind of like small mistakes, which just makes it very difficult or makes the article less uh, readable, in fact. I think after that, once you're done with that process, is I mean, when you're done writing, then just make sure that you edit your article once yourself. So before you send your articles to your cluster heads, make sure you've edited it already from from like from your side. And just make sure you keep reading your articles again and again, maybe like twice or thrice, so that I mean, when you're reading it again and again, then you see the mistakes that you've made and then you'll correct them. So just make a habit of revising the work that you've done before you send it to your cluster heads. Um, okay. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so I'm just getting back to how you narrow your articles. These are just some strategies that you can use to narrow your topic. For instance, you can look at a particular aspect of the entire topic. So, for instance, like I mentioned, India and China. So maybe you can look at just the Ladakh issue, or maybe just the cultural aspect that's shared between both the countries, or maybe just the history. But just try to make it as narrow as possible by looking at one particular aspect. So something like a component of a bigger issue, right? um Other than that, you can talk, I mean, you can narrow your topic by geographical units as well. So for instance, you can look at like, let's say if you're looking at rice cultivation, then maybe you can only talk about UP rather than talking about the entire India. You know, you can just look at rice cultivation in UP. So it helps you narrow your research. How, I mean, you know, when it just helps you narrow your article and makes it more detailed. Because if you talk about something as big as India, it's huge and there's so much to cover. You technically just have like about 800 to 1500 words to write, right? So just make sure you narrow it in one of these ways. Other than that, you can look at even like particular relationships between two topics. Like let's say you're looking at again rice cultivation, then maybe you can look at greenhouse gas emissions in relation to rice cultivations, you know. It again, this again helps you make it narrower and more specific. You can look at particular eras like trade relation between India and Nepal from 1919s to 2000 to 2008 or something like that, you know, like just take a time period that you're looking at. You can also focus your topic in terms of specifics like races or sexes, class of people. In fact, like these are just strategies, but there are many other ways that you can sort of strategies you can adopt to narrow your article. You can even combine these aspects. So let's say you can look at to make your topic more narrow. So you can look at, let's say, condition of women farmers in Uttar Pradesh. So you know you're combining the aspect of type, relationship, and place together, and you're making your topic narrow. Like, I hope this helps. Like, is there any question with respect to how, with respect to narrowing before we go ahead? Okay. Prerna, you can go ahead.
So I'll just talk about like basic structure of argument. So this is something that helps me a lot in order to like even structure like little paragraphs inside the paper itself. And so the structure is ARE, which is like which is assertion, reasoning, and example. So I'll explain it with an example, which is fine. Um, so for example, let's take let's take the argument that let's take the assertion that cancel culture is related to celebrity culture. So this is a statement that I'm making, right? It currently has no background to it. It currently has no reasoning to it. This is simply an assertion which I think is worth looking into. So that would be the A of my argument, right? So then how would I then ground this assertion and make it applicable to the context of the paper? So this is of course the context which I'm talking about is a little bit op-edy, so like not really like an academic article, but it's easier to understand this way. So for example, if you take cancel culture as celebrity culture, the possible reasonings that you would come up with is say is how is what is the implication of being a celebrity, or what comes with the position of a celebrity. So for example, your reasoning could go as cancel culture and celebrity culture are related because we as a society have started to sort of like pedestalize celebrities to a certain extent, where we also think it's imperative that holding them accountable for certain acts which cover certain problematic areas is becoming essentially important, very essential, because they have become like this integral part of what influences a lot of people's decisions. And so that sort of like pedestalization is what is hence leading to cancel culture being related to your celebrity status. I mean, let's be clear, like not everybody gets cancelled everywhere. It's just people who have like some sort of influence. So that would be your reasoning. And now, okay, this is something the author sort of observes in a certain setting. So this is just an observation at this point with the assertion and reasoning. The example will ground it. So your example could be just let's go with the J.K. Rowling example. So J.K. Rowling example would give you sort of an entry point into a good like research article on why celebrity culture is related to cancel culture, right? Because J.K. Rowling, one, is something that has already happened. She is currently getting cancelled. And it also has like real life implications. And you can make certain kinds of sociological interpretations out of it. So this is like kind of a structure that you could follow in order to like structure your arguments better. Because I mean, if you leave your paper with like tons of assertions, say for example, if you're sort of writing a paper on the ill effects of patriarchy, right? This is a really general topic. But if you're writing on something like ill effects of patriarchy and your entire paper is crowded with things like patriarchy affects women, patriarchy doesn't let women work, patriarchy is um, sort of doesn't equalize, patriarchy also doesn't let women sort of equalize in society. These are all assertions, right? You have to give me a reasoning as to why patriarchy is then bad for women, right? Understood. I accept your assertion that patriarchy is bad for women. Why? Is there like a structural implication to it? Is there a class implication to it? And if that is the reasoning you follow, give me an example of when women have not benefited from the patriarchy. For example, lack pay gaps and wage gaps, and how women aren't being hired into the workforce. So these are all like these are all like really broad ways in which you can structure your paragraphs and even like your whole paper, right? An assertion is simply your thesis, but you need to go beyond your thesis and look at like the thesis of every single paragraph, because all of those are saying something separate, but also all of those build up to make this larger argument, which is also really important. So let us just move on. Right. Um, Nanshika, can you pull this article up and like post it in the chat? It's the How to Read Ethically article. You guys can still see the presentation, right?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. So let me just. This is horrible to use. I hate it. I'm so sorry. Uh, Okay, so I'll go. These are two paragraphs from an article I wrote. They're not the best, but I thought that these were two paragraphs which we could like maybe closely look at and sort of get an idea of how you could structure arguments within like papers as well, right? So a lot of time, like most of us face issues with like articulation within context as well, because you can't just be making like one point throughout the paper. It has to be some sort of like diversification as well. So we'll just look at these two paragraphs, and I'll read the first paragraph out. So the paper is basically based on the idea of ethical consumption in reading and how that has implications on cancel culture and celebrity culture and like related strands. So the obvious opposition to ethical consumption is censorship. So this is definitely an assertion, right? Like the paragraph is starting with the premise on what the paragraph is going to discuss. So the implication here is that the author here has defined that ethical consumption and censorship are related in some manner, but also that censorship is considered as an opposition to ethical consumption. Now, now they'll explain why. How can you stop people from consuming a certain kind of art just because it's coming from a source that may potentially be harmful? Now, these are questions being posed to that assertion. These would form part of like your reasoning part of the essay, right? Censorship has always been held as something which stops art from realizing its maximum potential. In fact, in the many debates surrounding J.K. Rowling, the most pressing was the Harper's Bazaar letter. This is an example. So, picking up the Harper's Bazaar letter is making the fact that ethical consumption and censorship have already been related to in the sociological context. So, this doesn't exist as some sort of like manic idea that the author had and was like, fine, I'll just write a fucking paper on this. It's actually coming from like grounding it in this particular article. A group of acclaimed intellectuals of the world, including Noam Chomsky, wrote on the hazards of boycotting writers and intellectuals, and how censorship in academia is rampant and prevents people from getting the chance to grow and learn. In that, I agree with them. Censorship is rampant. Is rampant in the custodial violence that several poets and authors have had to face because of the brutal anti-terror laws in India. Perumal Murugan being forced to write apology letters for his novel One Part Woman was censorship. Salman Rushdie facing backlash for satanic verses was censorship. Taslima Nasreen being banned for Lajja was censorship. Then the issue is not censorship because clearly the authority here lies somewhere else, right? The reader is not actively deciding or even choosing to read, but if they do, they will make the conscious decision of consuming something coming from a particular source. I do not think the author can die, perhaps not in an age where the author has become a celebrity. It now comes with its own connotations of who is writing the story and why, and may as well have serious implications on what we are reading as a consequence. I also do not think that stopping the consumption of literature that is coming from elite positions or dangerous positions is the answer either. And I see that as someone, so last line is fine. But okay, we can work like backwards, right? So would anyone like to point out what you think are the assertions here? What do you think is the implication of the reasoning? And what do you think is the example of this? Like basically, if this were just the paper, like this is your paper, the one paragraph that I've talked about, how would you dissect this? How would you explain this to someone who doesn't know the background of this? You guys can raise your hands, maybe. I can't see. Come on, guys.
Well, guys, someone please go ahead because Machika and Prerna have taken out a lot of their time to make this workshop a good one. So please. And this is nothing that, we as Ashokans can't answer.
Yeah, dude, it's just closed reading.
Just ask one of them. Just ask one of them.
How about Yashasvi? Yes.
Yeah, can I just read it once again?
Yeah, for sure.
Give me a minute. So the reasoning will be this example that you've given from the Harper's Bazaar.
Yeah.
What was the third thing? I'm sorry.
The assertion, the reasoning, and the example. So just like look at the paragraph and tell me, just like forget about this. Just tell me what do you think the argument here is and how the author is going about it.
So the connection between the two, between cancel culture and whether it should it be considered or not. So the assertion is the ethical consumption, this sentence, and the reasoning was their example. And no, wait, that would be the example, I guess.
Take your time. It's a bit more specific, right? Like,
Right, yeah.
I mean, think about this. They are talking about a certain form of censorship and trying to relate that. So how does that work? It's not that like it's not rocket science.
Does anybody else want to give it a shot?
Yeah. Otherwise, I'll just move on.
Krishanu, do you want to go ahead? Manya Sheel, are you there?
Yeah, but I just joined. So can you just repeat what I have to do?
I think like you'll have to catch up. Maybe like once you watch the the entire video back, you'll get a sense of what we're talking about.
All right, yeah, sure.
But
sure.
Okay. I'll explain it. But guys, really, I mean, I think we're holding this workshop so that you also have an easier time with us and like we can all work nicely. And
Uh,
I mean, if
Prerna
I
just
see,
asked, just everyone just turn on their videos.
I mean, no, that's okay. But I just like it's okay. It's I mean, I wrote the paper, so I could tell you what I was writing. But what's the point then? Just I'll just wait for like 2 minutes if someone wants to volunteer. How about just Shikhar? Shikhar, do you want to explain? I mean, don't worry, dude. We're not grading you, so it's okay if you like fuck up with it.
Okay, so I feel like
Yeah,
the assertion is that ethical consumption is censorship. That is one thing that is being said, but here the assertion is that it's not always censorship. Like, I mean, like censorship has a sort of different strands, basically. Like, uh, it's not always. It's not like censorship is a uniform thing. There are different forms of censorship where there's a power dynamics in play, and that is the reasoning in through the different examples that is being given. That is the reasoning put forward, that censorship can be of different forms. That Tasliman Nasrim and Salman Rushdie, these were like the bad forms of suppressive censorship, and here when we are talking about J.K. Rowling, the censorship is a form of accountability. And
okay, great. That's great. Good one.
yeah,
You guys know why we're speaking of. Yeah. So exactly what Shikhar said, right? 3 ideas in one paragraph. All of these are like extremely clear. I mean, I'm also proud of this essay. But also like if you were to like implicatively read it, I mean there are 3 ideas, right? Censorship, ethical consumption, both the relation of that and how power plays into that. And and I mean you could like get a lot out of close reading certain essays. So I would suggest while you're writing this, look up essays that you actually look up to. So for me, it's like it's literary essays that I love reading because they're easier to read. They convey like really complicated ideas in a shorter, faster pace. And so that's how my essays are structured. They're more conversational. They're more like more questioning. And a lot of my paragraphs would start with like 3 questions. All of those 3 would be like answered in. So that's how I structure them. And just like find your pace of this, right? So I know certain people, someone I worked with last semester used to just like start their essays with a reference to an article they were going to discuss and then how that article has implications on like that paragraph. So find that sort of like area which makes you comfortable, but also that has to be very specific to your paper. You can't just be writing like random vague assertions like in this survey I found 3 women don't feel safe. Don't care, bro. What's the implication of that? Like, survey to your paper or your question, or why are you asking this question in the first place? I think those have to be like ideas that are going around when you're sort of writing. So, wait, I'll just move on from this because
Prerna, I had a question.
yeah,
Um, I understand the structuring for like argumentative piece, like what you're showing us.
right.
But if if the piece is meant to be more, let's say, informative, then how would you suggest we go about the structure? Because I always have this contention of whether like an informative piece versus an argumentative, whether I always need to have an argument and something like that.
I mean, your information, when you're picking your information, why? Like, why are you picking that information? Specifically, why did you go to the wire and look up articles on Delhi riots if you were writing a paper on like information of Delhi riots? Like the constant like questioning of your own sources is your argument. So an informative piece is not devoid of argumentation. An informative piece also is not devoid of biasness. So I don't exactly know what the like straight difference is between those two. I think that's like a really large debate in academia itself. So I'm not the person to answer it, honestly. I'm not an academic. So yeah, Vanchika, Vanchika wants to say something.
Yeah, just because I mean I sort of know where Ashka's coming from because she's from my cluster. So, like I told you earlier, also Ashka, I mean, at least in my opinion, your articles should always have an argument. At least for like nickel and dime, you can't just have an article with all information in it. Like Prerna said, why you picked out that information to put in the article in the first place, and after you've collated all information, what do you say that the information is sort of showing you? Like an analysis. It doesn't always like I get it that from the very beginning of the article you may not have like oh through this article I'm just going to like sort of like assert that this is what is happening, but you can sort of sort of show reflections of the information that you're putting it in the article, if that's making sense.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on this?
I just wanted to add something. Yeah, so that being said, Ashika, when you use your information, so also it's just that you might want to explain something before you really go on analyzing it. So that's just one part of your article that just can't be your entire article. I think that's what everyone's trying to say here. That the way you add value as a writer, as an analyst, is where you present your views, and you don't necessarily need to have a very staunch view on something. You can present both sides, just have some analysis to it. It just can't end at being a collation of 5 different articles.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So does anyone have anything else, like a question or anything? Okay, guess I'll move on. Yeah. Anshika?
Yeah. So these are basically the common mistakes that we felt that I mean the entire editorial team felt that have been happening in our in the articles you guys have been submitting, and we're just pointing those out. So first, I'll talk about the writing style. I think one of the problems that we have been seeing repeatedly in articles is that they all, I mean, let's say they start with saying the person said this, and then every second line literally says the same. I mean, let's say it says like the person said this and the person did this and the person, so it every time it starts with the same word, like so it just makes your article very uninteresting to read. Just try having like try using different structures of sentences, you know active voice, passive voices. Just change the way your sentence is structured, so that you don't keep repeating the same word again and again. Same with again words like try using synonyms that don't look like your entire article is just using the same words again and again, you know um other than that, I think sometimes the choice of words that you guys use is also politically incorrect, or are you know or are very informal. This is a I mean, Nickel and Dime is an academic platform, so we don't use words that are informal or politically incorrect in terms of I mean, just use formal words in terms of, don't use abbreviations like gonna, wanna, all of these. Like, it just doesn't work. Okay, just make sure it's formal and you choose the words carefully. Especially a lot of people writing about gender or even other sensitive topics, make sure the words that you pick is sensitive too, because there are a lot of gray areas, and you need to be sensitive to them. Other than that, again, as Prerna did mention the ARD pattern, back your arguments. You can't. I mean, everybody has an opinion, and I understand that, but make sure you have an argument backing that up. You can't say that you just feel this way, because more than your opinion, it's more of it's not an opinion piece. It's more of an argumentative piece. So even if you mention that this is how you feel, you need to back it up with other sites or other people saying the same thing. Okay. Again, the same point as the first point, bring variations in your writing, in the way you write, your structure of the sentences. That just makes your writing much more interesting to read. In terms of structure of your entire uh, article, make sure that you have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. I mean, this is literally the basics, guys, and make sure that you do stick to the basics, because you can't have an article without a conclusion. It's just not accepted. Please I mean, just have a introductory paragraph where you explain what your article is about, a body with an arguments on it, of it in conclusion, wrapping everything up. Consider using subsections. Again, nickel and dime, as you guys all know, is online, so a lot of people read your articles from the phone as well. So if you just write extremely long paragraphs or don't have subsections, it's very difficult to read, and two, it just makes um it's just difficult to understand what exactly you're trying to say. More subsections, more paragraphs just helps you chalk your arguments out in a much better manner. Use shorter paragraphs and use shorter sentences as well. Some of you use extremely long sentences, like 4 to 5 lines of a Word doc. It's just very confusing. So just make sure you use shorter sentences if you're not very good with fluently writing long sentences. Um, Grammar, again, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, there is no harm in going back and brushing up your basic grammar, and reading up on basic grammar. I mean, sometimes I'm, when we're editing, we realize that it might be a rush or whatever, but I feel like grammar can be much better in some sense or the other. So just make sure, if you're not clear about anything, to just check it up. I mean, I'm guessing most of you guys write in a Word doc, so maybe if it automatically highlights, right, if your sentence structure or the grammar is wrong. So just make sure you check that and fix your, just edit your article based on the grammar. Again, use punctuations, commas, semicolons, even the dash. I mean, just use like punctuations that will help your sentences to be more structured in some sense or the other, especially long sentences. Try breaking either the sentences, and if you can't, then make sure you using punctuations. Again, follow one tense. If you're writing in past tense, then don't suddenly change into present. Just your entire article has to be in one tense. So just make sure you follow that throughout. Spellings. Again, most of you writing in work docs, you should be knowing that the spellings are not, they're incorrect. But in case you don't and you're unsure about something, just go and check. It's really difficult for the editors to read the articles again and again, fix all of these issues, which can be done from your part. We want, as the editorial team, we want to focus on making your articles more refined than just fixing the article so that it's at least readable. There's a huge distinction between that, and it takes not only our energy, but it takes a lot of your time as well, because by the end of it, either we're re-editing the entire thing or you're rewriting the entire article, which makes no sense. You just have one article to write per month, and one or two, and I don't think so that's much to ask for. And while I understand you guys might be having submissions, but so do we. And if we are spending that much of time on reading each and every article every week, then I feel like, I mean, that's the least you can do, right? I think that's about that, but we don't have much more to add. But if there are any other questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, Siddharth.
Hi, thank you so much. It was a lovely presentation, but I just wanted to quickly add one point, and this with respect to what I usually face when I'm writing articles, right? The thing is, the thing is, you always decide on a topic, and when you always try to narrow down on a topic, one thing that you guys have to keep in mind is that you really have to be interested in what you're writing, right? Because the amount of interest that you have in approaching and writing about the subject directly impacts the amount you put, and that directly impacts the quality of the article that you write. So just wanted to add that, please make sure that you are really interested in writing that piece, or you're really interested in exploring that subject, right? And I completely agree that it's not always the case that the interest that you have when you are starting to explore that subject may not be consistent throughout the time that you're working on your piece. But I think one way for you all to counter it is, and to overcome that, is to keep in mind that this is going to happen, right? Keep in mind that your interest will wane at some point of time, probably because you don't get so much material to read on, right? There's not that much of secondary literature that explores different tangents to the same topic, right? Just keep in mind that it's going to happen when you are beginning to explore the topic in itself, and then try to narrow down to the topic that you have to write and everything, right? Just wanted to add on that point. Thank you.
Anyone have questions? Mm. No questions.
Guys, are you sure there are no questions? We can stop if that's all.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So, how open are we? Like, how allowed, since it's academic, to have our own opinions in our articles? Do they all, like, we just need to ensure that they're substantiated with facts or evidence, right? But like,
That's
Yeah,
evidence.
I mean that's
Yeah. Sorry. Just go on.
I was just saying, yeah, that's the point. Like you can have your opinions, but it cannot be baseless opinions, right? Like there needs to be an argument of why you feel that's true, and you need to back that up. That's mostly it. Otherwise, you have, the liberty to choose sides maybe, or see like um, what you feel is right or wrong, or I mean whatever your opinion is, but just make sure that it's not baseless.
Yeah, I mean, standard
Right.
academic practice is to like look at secondary sources. So look up like articles or book chapters which are peer reviewed on JSTOR or anything, and like you'll find a lot of information online. So use that, I guess. Does someone
Yeah,
else?
just
Yeah.
no, I was just adding a point that just, following up from what both Prerna and Vanchika said, where, you're using, let's say, other articles. I feel like a lot of you, I mean, at least from what I've seen while editing articles, is that a lot of you are even sort of explaining other papers in an incorrect manner. So if there is a paper which has talked about, let's say, how historically a concept is understood, so then if you're using that paper to build an argument, then you say historically this concept has been understood. You can't just twist it and be like, this concept is understood, because concepts change, right? And especially political words and notions about things like gender and all, they're constantly like being questioned, and sort of with more and more literature, there's more and more information about it. So if there's an historical argument, you can't just be like, even in current times this happens. Like you can't do that, because then you're sort of completely changing the the argument and the credibility of the paper.
Yeah, and just like adding on to it, avoid making generalization. So
Right.
once you've like picked your area, that area has to be specific, but your like implications can't be that general. So for example, you're saying like the entire patriarchy functions like this. Like that's an incorrect statement to make, because I mean it has like certain structures which are concentrated in areas which are much smaller and like much minute. So like look at a specific area, and that would like greatly make your arguments more robust as well. So if you're specifically looking at the effect of patriarchy on, say, trans men, for example, like this is just a random example, then look at like cases which have probably been discussed, or maybe representation in a particular movie, for example. Those are always like specific ways to look at general and larger arguments about this, not the other way around, because you can't impose like your opinion of a structure onto specificities, because that would be like drawing too much out of something which is too little. So
I think somebody else also had a question. Manya, was it you? Did you?
No, I didn't. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other question? Does anybody from the editorial team want to add anything?
Can I add one thing?
yeah.
Yeah, regarding whatever has been said regarding generalizations and opinions, um, I would rather discourage everyone to have a generalized opinion regarding what you think is right or wrong. The dichotomous opinions that it comes up, many of you are in the first or second year, it comes up a lot. And as most of the professors that will you will be encountering in social science and humanities, just paraphrasing them, no one cares what you think is right or wrong. No one cares. Your paper should have analytical value of explaining what is happening, but what you think is right or wrong, I don't care. Professor doesn't care. Editorial team doesn't care, and your professors doesn't care, don't care. So please desist from making such kind of dichotomous opinions that you think, yeah, you can have like RSS is wrong, BJP is wrong. That is your own personal opinion. Keep it to yourself. But what they are doing, how they are doing, and what particular value, analytical value that you can add to explaining what is happening, that is basically of interest to us, and frankly in most of your courses. So just an advice to everyone.
If nobody has questions, we can end. I think thank you for coming, and please just try, keeping these points in mind. And we're hoping that the quality of submissions that we receive and that go up to the website are much better from here on. Feel free to contact us even outside this meeting in case you're still stuck somewhere. We do really want to help you, and we do really want the content to go much better. So just feel free to mail or WhatsApp any one of us. Um, Thanks, guys.